Well, nearly a year on, and we reflect on Cyclone Gabrielle and the enormous impact to our region, how it impacted so many families, and we think of those who lost loved ones through the cyclone, and we think of those who lost their homes and property, and we also think about those who lost their livelihoods. And as we recover and respond, our day on the 14th of February 2023 is etched in our memories as we remember what happened on that day, and everybody has a different story to tell and how it impacted so many lives. For me personally, we had 15 trees come down in our driveway, and so as the mayor, it was soon evident that we needed to sign a state of emergency declaration, and I needed to get out of my home to sign that, but realising that the vastness of the cyclone, and I couldn't get a vehicle out of my property. So the team had to walk over from Civil Defence through all the broken trees and debris at 2 o'clock in the morning for me to then sign the declaration from that day. None of us knew the intensity and the extent of the rain that fell, and in some areas it was recorded 545 millimetres of water fell up in our farmlands, up in our rural community, and in areas like Havelock North, 250 millimetres of water fell, and we've never seen water like that. The dams in Havelock North were tested. They were built in the early 80s, and they were tested for the first time. And the dams functioned really well, but the slipways and the streams couldn't cope with the enormous amount of water that came through. So everybody has a different memory and reflection. Some of the hardship and heartache of families needing to be rescued from rooftops, and we think of that day with the helicopters circling. Remember the Defence Force arriving from Linton and coming up, and it was a great relief for me to see when they came into Hastings and set up the big army headquarters for us to be able to understand the enormity of the damage and the damage in our rural area. And my first visit was out to see the Puketapu Bridge and just was overwhelmed with the velocity of water and the impact of a bridge being snapped in half, and then to the Brookfields Bridge and then the Waiheke Bridge, and checking in on our marae communities and seeing the enormity of cleanup that started straight away. So all weekend we'd been setting up emergency headquarters, emergency hubs, and both in Flaxmere and in Hastings. And nobody really knew at that point where the cyclone was going to strike across the region and across our district. It certainly wasn't in our urban areas, and it certainly impacted most vastly and greatly in our rural communities. And so to have communities isolated and unable to access town to get their normal provisions of food and to go to work, and those were the challenges that we faced right at the beginning, was the lack of access of being able to get people moved from their properties back into town. And so the emergency hub was immediately set up at the showgrounds, and we saw an incredible amount of amazing volunteers who came to the showgrounds, to the emergency hub, to help distribute all sorts of requirements for communities, from generators to clothes to food to supplies to feed for animals, for medical supplies, and that was an incredible hub set up down there very, very quickly. Well, at that point in time, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we still had cell phone access, and so I contacted Mayor Kirsten with the team from Civil Defence and NEMA, and we heard what was happening across our region and knew it was important to declare as soon as possible. So we both signed the declaration at the same time. I think the hardest thing was when I first came into the Civil Defence headquarters and saw the intensity of people not being able to communicate with their loved ones and people not being able to find out if their loved ones were safe. And so the police started a list, and that list suddenly grew to 4,500 people. And that was quite terrifying and quite horrific for so many people, because just the unknownness of not being able to contact them with cell phones being down. So the first few days were incredibly hard with no communication. I remember my goddaughter calling me about her parents, and they lived in Puketapu, and she couldn't reach them, and she was just desperate. And so, you know, we just had to keep recording these names to see when people could actually get to cell phone coverage to be able to, and cell phones and connections to be reconnected so we could find out if people were safe. And it was quite terrifying. I was in the evacuation hub from early on the 14th of February, and seeing the first people arriving, particularly our RSE workers who were being helicoptered off rooftop. And I met families from Pakowhai, and they arrived wet, and they had very, very wet clothes, and they had been waiting all morning to be rescued. Some people waited all day to be rescued from rooftops. And so we didn't really know the vastness of the challenges that people were facing until they came to our emergency hubs and shared their stories and the trauma that they went through. The anniversary day, the 14th of February this year, is going to be a day that is going to be difficult for some people, but also healing for others. And it will be an opportunity for people to come together to share their stories. On the Appreciation Day on the Sunday, the 11th, it will be wonderful to be able to thank the amazing volunteers who just work tirelessly, either cleaning up silt and cleaning debris from around properties. I remember the people cleaning the onions from the fence lines in Swamp Road, all of the community out at Pakowhai, digging out the silt from the store and the service station. Just endless people came from to work tirelessly over that period of time to clear silt and try to help people access their properties and recover some of their very precious items, and keeping people safe and finding accommodation for them was a very big challenge in those first couple of weeks. And so we will reflect and remember all of those really, really tragic and trying conditions, but most importantly, we will remember those families who lost their loved ones. Well, it's been wonderful to have all of our region united and what is going to be suitable for their communities, from Wairoa down to Central Hawke's Bay and Hastings and Napier. And so we've had teams working together, and we're going to have our black and white Hawke's Bay Recovery Day, when everybody is encouraged to wear their black and white clothing to stand in unity for our region's recovery. We know we've got a long way to go. Each day we make little steps of progress to get better access, rebuild roads. 2 bridges are underway and are going to be up and running in 18 months' time. That's the Puketapu and the Matapiro, and rebuilding culverts, and just getting some sort of normality and creating really good access and getting our region back to how we knew it pre-cyclone. I'm just so grateful so many people have worked so hard. We've had people helping us who came from Christchurch, who went through the earthquake. We've had teams of engineers arrive to help us, road builders. And for us, you know, having the government funding to remove silt and debris from our damaged lands and properties has been a huge help. It's incredible to see the apples on the tree, bright red apples now that are going to be harvested, and seeing our economy standing up again, and seeing the clean-up happening since the cyclone. So we're absolutely thrilled that we got those 10 temporary bridges standing up very, very quickly, and that enabled our community to move around the region much better than they were, instead of all of the big traffic jams that were happening for months afterwards. So now to have those 2 bridges being rebuilt is really exciting, and then the other ones will come in a few years' time. But those are the most urgent now, and we've been working with our communities to understand what sort of bridges they want and need. And so just the silt, and we've cleared 1.4 million cubic metres of silt, and there's still about 1 million to go, and we hope that we can get some future funding from the government to help us clear that and clear the 5 dump sites for the silt and debris. The voluntary buyout is really, really important now to our people and their well-being, so they can move on with their lives. And out of the 165 people who are looking at a voluntary buyout, great progress has been made with a large number of them. About 140 now are in the process, and that's really exciting to think that, you know, we've got settlements happening, we've got negotiations happening, with valuations happening, and hopefully by the end of the year we get a large volume of people that have had their settlements and can rebuild their homes somewhere else. Our heart goes out to our community who have been through so much, particularly those in the really hardest hit communities who have lost their homes. Some people have lived in those places for 5 generations and have built their livelihoods there and raised their children in those communities. And I think about you every day, and our heart goes out to you as you rebuild, and we hope that, you know, you're going to be able to get on with your lives as soon as possible. And I know it will be a difficult day on the 14th of February as you reflect what you've been through, and we think of you on that day, and we think of what you've been through and the hardship and the difficulties of standing up again. But one of the, you know, out of adversity, there always comes a sense of hope and change. And one of the things that we are very, very proud of change is that we have now 30 communities stood up to create community resilience hubs. And all those hubs will be up and running by the end of this year. Our community leaders, our volunteers have been trained by emergency management teams, and they will have all of the equipment they need for power, communications, bedding, food. So all of these community hubs, they're all different across our district, and we're really proud that our leaders have stood up and shown the leadership to create these hubs. And they're amazing people, and we've got $2 million, $1 million from Red Cross and $1 million from MPI to make sure that the hubs have all the equipment they need. So if we have any future events, our communities can be resilient and can look after themselves in the short term. So that is something that we should all be really proud of, you know, and out of this really challenging time, we've got these wonderful resilient hubs led by some wonderful people.